Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens, bright copper kettles and warm woolen mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Brick Pit, the podcast you didn't know that you didn't need, where we sit around and talk about movies, pop culture, television, and sometimes get sidetracked. If this is your first time listening, awesome. Do not go back and listen to our early stuff. Just the later the better. Adam had this was before his surgery, so it's all cosmetic. Don't worry about it. My name's Josh. I'll be taking over hosting duties today, and with me, as always, is the Grand Funk Railroad to my America, Adam.
I don't even know how to respond to that. Thank you for having me, I reckon.
And the most famous fence post sitter on the podcast, Jason.
I'm trying to upgrade to flagpole sitter. As per the late 90s hit song from Harvey Danger.
I thought you were going to go with, you pulled the pin out of the flagpole and let it fall down because you were smarter than the others, like Steve Rogers. So you got to ride the Jeep back.
No.
Okay. So it's summertime, maybe not when you're listening, but in actual time and space where we are locked in forever at this point.
We're from the South. It's always summertime.
Yeah.
And actually, the night that we are recording this is the summer solstice, though. So it is the longest day of the year.
I'm not religious, so I don't know about that.
For those of you who celebrate.
Just in case this podcast wasn't nerdy enough for you.
I mean, I didn't explain how it's the point at which the sun is the furthest north in the northern hemisphere that it'll be for the entire year.
You're assuming now that our listeners have an elementary school education.
Those kids would be insulted if they could read, Bobby.
So we insult each other. We insult you, the listener. That is what we do. It makes you feel like you're at home with your parents that don't like you.
That wasn't everybody's experience?
And that's the podcast, really. That's pretty much the whole...
It's pretty much therapy at this point.
That's right.
It's not about the listens.
It was never about the listens.
There are three of us, and there were one listen for the last podcast.
And none of us will admit to being the one to actually listen to our own podcast.
Listen, the first person to confess gets to go home. That's
Well, so today I wanted to talk about, and there will be some contention, I know, just in the very premise, but we can talk about that. But I want to talk about our favorite films. And the way I wanted to couch it is I wanted it to be a single film, because I personally get aggravated when people are like, oh, this is the best. And they're like, well, I like A and B. And it's like, that's not how this works.
You also clarified that it had to be one that we have not yet extensively talked about. So that also reduced the choices.
I mean, that's just so we don't
to explain how I got to where I was is what I'm saying. So.
I wanted you to commit, because a lot of times, especially on top 10 list or whatever, like there's just always that kind of, well, I like this and this. And it's like, no, make a decision.
I reject your premise.
Both of you did. So.
Because I completely, and for once, in fact, I think the only time I completely agree with Jason.
Offline, we talked. Jason, is very much of the depends on my mood, where I'm at, how my day was, what my favorite film is. I guess I'm more of an absolutist, because, like, my list, and I grant that people can change throughout their life. There was a time where Transformers the movie was my favorite film. That is today. But before that, it was G.I. Joe the movie. I didn't know any better. I was a kid.
And there was that one weekend where it was Billy Madison, but that was...
there was the Hubie Halloween weekend extravaganza where I just had it on repeat
at John's house. He'll never hear that shout out, but that's okay.
But at any given time, there is a top. There is one above the other. And the film that I want to talk about is probably been the top spot since like 1999. So it might as well. At this point, most of my life, it has been my favorite film. So each of you guys subscribe to like there's nothing that just looms large in your life that's just like above and beyond the best.
If pressed.
Which I am pressing.
I would have said Blade Runner, I think, which we've talked about a lot. So I'm not going to talk about it tonight. But if you had to.
Is that a movie?
It once was. It's also a book. And a song and an anime and all kinds of other collateral material. But yeah, I suspect that maybe there's some other element to it rather than just the film. For me, Blade Runner was the coolest movie I'd seen with my dad up to that point. And so there's some nostalgia element to it. On top of it being an excellent film, there's sentimental value to that movie.
I think that's valid. I don't think when I say like favorite movie, you know, there's right. Always that component extra to it because we're not just robots. You know, we're complicated flesh creatures that have multifaceted feelings and dimensions. So,
which is different, I think, than if you were to ask.
What the best movie is.
What the best movie is, like as an analyst or as a film buff or something. Like I would give it like, what is the best movie for most people is a different answer than what is my favorite movie, right? That's a different concept to me.
Well, yeah, and you can break down favorites into different what's your favorite movie to watch with people? You know, right. That's would have a very different answer. I would say like something like Miami Connection or Back from Hell. Those are movies I would watch
with people,
and it's because it's, it's
a different experience watching.
Yeah, it's a completely different experience, and it's something that you don't mind if people are yelling at the screen and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It makes it more fun and interactive. Versus some films that it's like, well, like the film that I want to talk about is not for everyone. In fact, that is one of the only films my mother ever walked out of, which may play into the psychology of why it's my favorite.
I also think it's kind of odd that your favorite is your autobiography. So I mean, there's all those things tell a story there too. So
yeah, it is. I mean, for obvious reasons, when you signed the life rights away to the film producers, it was like I knew that's why you chose that movie. But
well, the sex scenes, though graphic, were added to the film. They were tastefully done.
I will say, Josh, I am sorry that I disappointed you on this topic that you want to do, despite the fact that I've already told you I don't have a favorite movie, and we literally had an episode around that in the first season, Comfort and Joy, where we talk about movies that we will always watch because I don't have a personal favorite.
Well, yeah.
I forgot about that.
But interestingly enough, this
is different, I think.
This is different because, like, it's the cat's out of the bag. The film I like is Magnolia. I can only watch it like once every 5 or 6 years because it's so emotionally draining to me. But that doesn't change the fact it's my favorite film. But it's not like A Christmas Story. I'm going to watch it every Christmas.
Right.
Like, it's too much.
Yeah, I'd never seen it before until this.
I'm excited to talk about it because of that.
Yeah,
Jason, is there anything that you are you kind of like that in all aspects of your personality, or are there certain things that you will like this have favorites in that are not mood dependent?
Most of it, is kind of dependent on where I am at the time. There are certain things that will always be favorites, but a lot of those are things, from my childhood that I have deep emotional connections to.
Mm-hmm.
Like my favorite dessert is the one my mother made for me.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. She made herself, not bought at the store or anything like that. And so there's a very personal connection to that. And Actually, I just recently shared that recipe with my cousin's oldest because she's gotten to that point where she can, start cooking and baking and stuff like that. And so that was kind of a very special thing to do, to pass it on, because my uncle and everything was big fans of that recipe. So to be able to pass it on so that he can enjoy it now too, whenever his granddaughter is visiting him.
Right.
I mean, when it comes to entertainment, yeah, it's definitely where I am in my personal space at the time on what I will watch, what I kind of crave, what will be at the forefront of my mind as something that will actually enjoy or, take something from. Like you clearly have an emotional connection to Magnolia because of how you react to it. And that's, the highest compliment of art.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, especially the recipe, because I'm the same way. I have a recipe that my mom, and it's not. She had a dessert that she would make. She'd make these cakes for our birthday, and it's really not the greatest thing, but especially now that she's passed away, like that's
a link to the past.
Yeah, and so I mean, nostalgia is a very powerful motivation.
Yeah, especially with foods and scents,
and I think that's why we see that a lot in cinema and TV now, is because our generation has the purchasing power, so we're targeted a lot, and we're starting to phase out of that, but because we're getting old.
Well, nostalgia isn't something new. When we were growing up, we were hit with 50s and 60s nostalgia.
Yeah.
And a lot of movies and TV shows were remakes or reboots of old shows that our parents watched. So it's something, the nostalgia you're seeing just depends upon who's in charge of Hollywood at the time.
Right. Well, what's interesting, like if you watch a lot of Brat Pack films or Pretty in Pink and stuff like that, their aesthetic is less quote unquote 80s and more like vintage 40s and 50s, like they had been thrifting and stuff, and kind of updating it. And I think that's the thing that like the 80s nostalgia misses now, is that
that's not what the 80s were like.
They're removing the nostalgia from the time that this stuff was contemporary.
Yeah, I mean, if you mentioned, of course, John Hughes films. I mean, if you look at Ducky's wardrobe,
and Bobby Ringwald's film, in that it's very much like vintage 40s, 50s look, just kind of with accoutrement of the 80s, but it reflected their lower class status, and like they were probably getting this stuff from thrift shops and all. But it was a look, and it was a look that kind of like is ever present through that. I think you're absolutely right that there's always that thread of looking back and the rose-colored glasses of the past, So, nice point. Put a point on the board for Jason.
Sorry, I was Googling accoutrement.
He thought it was a cooking term.
You sound like my colleagues at work. They'll say, "Oh, you're using them fancy $5 words." I'm like, I mean, it's the right word to use. That's.
I will say though, when I was a kid, you most certainly have favorites then. Like there are things that you always go to, and any parent will know that a kid will watch the same movie over and over and over and over again. I would have to say, like, one of my absolute favorite as a kid was Empire Strikes Back.
Oh yeah,
like I wore that tape out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had 3 or 4 tapes that we pirated, like with 2 VCRs.
Yeah,
rent it from Blockbuster and then tape it. And you'd watch them over and over, and that's why I can recite Transformers, I can recite The Princess Bride, and a couple other films that like Clue the movie. But then I would like Miller's Crossing. Like I can't tell you how many times I watched Miller's Crossing before I was like 18. It's like I was kind of a weird kid. And the funny thing is, it never dawned on me to study film until I washed out of the music program because I couldn't read music. And I was like, what am I going to do? I like the movies.
And it's funny you said that because I think another favorite of mine, and I was maybe 10 or 11 when this happened, was Raising Arizona.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, the Coen brothers somehow infiltrated a lot of young people's minds early on. Because even like Crime Wave, like somehow hit us way too early. Like we didn't need to be watching Crime Wave. But
I seem to remember going through Speed. Is that the Keanu Reeves? That's right. The bus.
I remember The Drug, but not that's also a movie.
It's also a movie. Yeah, I think that was for a whole summer. I think I watched that a lot. But we used to do every Memorial Day to kick off the summer. We would watch the real Star Wars, the 3 Star Wars trilogy, all on the same day on Memorial Day, and we'd have a big water balloon fight and grill out hot dogs. And it was like a high holy day. It was like Star Wars Day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'd look forward to it.
There's something interesting about getting older too. Is like the difference is that, you know, I mean, the youth is wasted on the young and all that, but
Right.
you had more disposable time, and that becomes a much. So like you could watch Xanadu 5 times
Because you had nothing else to do.
right? Yeah, and it didn't matter. And now somebody's like, "You want to watch Xanadu?" And you're like, "Dude, it's like an hour and a half." No, why would I do that? That movie sucks.
I actually have a story about that when we get to Jason's movie today, but
About Xanadu?
no, about the time sink for movies. But also, there was just so much less media to consume, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have the internet, you didn't have ebooks. Like you ran out of books to read at home. You ran out of books. like till you got back to the library on Saturday or whatever.
Did you live in a library? You had books with an S
I
in
had
your
books with an S. Yeah, I come by that honestly. That was a big.
2.
Yes.
That's a fair point, Jason. More than one book is books.
And then they would have to go to the library to get the new one to put in the outhouse.
That's right.
When the old ones ran out.
The new one. It was like the town got a new book.
We did have that bathroom trivia book in the bathroom when I was growing up. The Bob's something, you used to get them at Cracker Barrel. My grandfather would buy the new one every time we would go in there to Bob's Trivia 6, you know, or whatever. Did you know a chicken can lay 8 eggs a day? You know, that kind of crap.
We had The Far Side.
We had that too. Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes.
The Far Side was the height of intellectual humor in my home.
And I might have to edit this story out, but I love this story. And I think Adam would get a kick out of it. When Josh and I were in college, we had a couple of friends. We got into the discussion at the end of the movie, The Time Machine, when he goes back to the future. They look on the shelf and they see that he's taken 3 books with him. And they never mentioned the books. And so then we, of course, get into the philosophical discussion of what 3 books you would take. And one of our friends was like, he would take a Far Side Gallery. And we're like, really? Would they understand it? And he's just like, he got so defensive about it. And it almost like turned into an argument. He's like, oh, Far Side's funny. He's like, no, I love the Far Side. The context of the Far Side, I don't think would really fit with this post-apocalyptic society.
Right. I don't know how much it would help you in a post-Morlock society.
And his final response was, I just want people to enjoy taking a crap. Is that wrong?
All right.
That's actually, so if you have listened thus far, reach out to us on Twitter or Facebook or X. Let us know what 3 books you would take into the future if you had a time machine in a post Morlock society. That's a fun drinking with people friend. Yeah. And it exposes a lot about people. Because like somebody's like, okay, I take this technical manual and this and that. You're like, all right, you're very practical. And then if somebody's like, I'll take the Far Side, you're like, you want people to take a crap comfortably. That's a high priority for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a variation of your stranded on a desert island.
Yeah,
and that's what this conversation. What's your desert island movie?
Basically,
how to get off a desert island? The movie.
I'd take the 1994 JCPenney Sears combo catalog that came in the local mail.
We need to stop right there. There's only a very specific section that you would need. The Star Wars toys.
The Star Wars toys and bedding. That was the other. Show all those quality craftsman tools that were available in the mid-90s.
There's somebody either mowing their lawn or driving going, I thought these guys talked about movies.
What is... Well...
Clearly their first time listening to this podcast.
Now they're talking about The Far Side and
taking a comfortable crap.
Anyone who's left after 3.5 years of us doing this knows what you're getting into.
I thought you were going to say anybody that doesn't like Gary Larson, I don't want you to listen.
That's right. If you can't be here in my Gary Larsonist,
then you can't be at my Calvin and Hobbesiness. I can't remember the guy. Bill
Waterston or something. Yeah, got it right back
I never
there.
read Calvin and Hobbes. And
you missed out.
I know. I don't care.
I read those newspapers.
You sound like there was a point in my grandfather's life where we were driving down the road. No, we were driving down the road, and I was like, "Hey, you want to turn on the radio?" And he's like, "I've heard enough music." Like he was just done.
I'm just waiting for the odometer to tick over. And
That's basically he's like, hey, I ain't buying any more green bananas. I mean, I'm just ready to go.
So before our audience gets to that point, why don't we go ahead and engage into a movie-centric conversation? I'll save mine for last because I probably got a lot to say. I think I'm more hyped for this podcast than the rest of you. So let's start with Jason. So we know this isn't really your favorite film, but your favorite film, right?
It was at 11 o'clock last night.
Right, it was when you texted us.
Well, I thought I might have like an outline or something to put this on, but no, that never materialized.
God, why would you even?
That says more about you than Josh, really.
You've known me since the movie that I'm going to reference came out.
I will say Jason's choice was a good choice because I watched it with my daughter last night, and that was kind of a fun thing to do. Which that's why I was saying about the time sync. Mm-hmm. It's a full length movie, and she didn't get to do her phone the whole time, and it literally looked like somebody was withdrawals sitting next to me. She's like, I left my phone in the other room. I'm like, it's fine. You don't need your phone for this. What if somebody's texting me? Well, then you'll just get it when you're done. Like it's. She goes, well, I'm not going to miss anything. This movie's real slow. And I was like, well, we'll talk about that on the podcast, and I'll make sure to tell them you said that. So that's how we got to there. So Jason, tell us all about it.
Well, yes, it is a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
But I think very well paced. It doesn't feel like
I think so too. Yeah, I think that's a generational thing, but the Utes can't handle it.
So my film is the 1990 Tom Selleck vehicle, Quigley Down Under.
All Matthew Quigley did was answer a help wanted ad. But a few surprises were waiting for Quigley Down Under. There was no mention of his friendly co-workers.
Is everybody in this country as butt ugly as you three?
Nor that he'd get an assistant.
Look out, Roy! Sorry, Roy!
Nothing about the transportation problem.
Are we lost?
Nope. I know exactly where we are. We're lost.
The unusual local inhabitants. The extraordinary cuisine.
I don't eat things that are still moving.
You gonna shoot it first?
Or the extra duties.
You can take me if you want to, Roy.
Kid, next time she talks like that, go all over the dress.
Worst of all, his employer turned out to be somewhat moody.
You could call it that.
But Quigley's about to teach him a lesson in labor relations.
That knocks me out of my own house.
Don't worry, Roy. Everything's gonna turn out just fine. Sorry, Roy.
My name ain't Roy, it's Matthew. Quigley. Matthew Quigley is really beginning to annoy me.
Tom Selleck, Laura San Giacomo, Alan Rickman, from the director of the Emmy Award-winning Lonesome Dove, Quigley, Down Under.
Now, I just happened to be flipping through the channels the other day after Josh brought up this topic, and like I saw that and was like, oh, it's been a while since I've watched Quigley Down Under, and I really do enjoy this film. It was like the last 20 minutes of it, and this is the great thing about 21st Century. I'll just stream it from the beginning. And like I said, it is a fantastic film. It is a Western, but it is set in Australia. But everything about this film reads Western.
Yeah.
The premise is that Tom Selleck is a sharpshooter and he answers an ad to go to Australia, presumably to hunt dingoes for this rancher, who is played in his just enormously fantastic style, Alan Rickman.
Yeah. In his
Tom
prime,
Selleck,
really.
Yeah. Tom Selleck this is right after Die Hard.
Right, yeah.
So, but Tom Selleck, of course, shows up in his full Western gear, and it really feels like a Western. The music by Basil Polydorus, who is a great composer, great cinema composer, he's done some of my favorite soundtracks: the original Conan the Barbarian, RoboCop, Hunt for Red October.
Yeah,
he's got a great just resume, and this sounds like an old Western soundtrack.
I actually had to look it up because I thought they'd repurposed it from another movie. I'm like, because it's got that melody is so iconic.
Yes.
That I've heard it outside of the context of this movie so much that I thought that it was something they had cribbed it from somewhere else, but that's not true.
No, it does. It feels like it could be, the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
An Elmer Bernstein composition. It has that same, just that emotional resonance in you. It feels like a Western soundtrack.
And they use it thematically through the whole movie to keep bringing you back to the same elements.
Yes.
And that very classic Western style. Motif, that was the word I was looking for. Thanks for the vocabulary lessons tonight, Josh. I wouldn't know what we'd do without you.
Well, he didn't fail out of music school because he didn't know leitmotif.
That's right.
I just couldn't tell you what a scale was.
That's right.
He thought it was something else. Also dealing with records, but completely different scenario. It's also shot in a way, much in the same way that John Ford used like Monument Valley to show you like the grandeur and the magnificence of the West. The outback of Australia is shot the same way. Like the vast open spaces. There's even a comment when he's riding on the back of a wagon going to the ranch, and it's days. Like you see him camping out and all that for several nights, and he's like, when do we get to Marston's ranch? And the ranch hand is like, we've been on his land for the past 2 days. That also brings out it comes up a lot about just how vast the space that they take up and they move across, because it's usually days between when things happen. You get a sense of who Matthew Quigley, who's Tom Selleck's character, is right from the get-go. The opening credits, of course, gives you all the backstory, like him packing his stuff up, and then he pulls out a map, and he traces his finger from like San Francisco down to Australia. And when he's getting off the boat, there's a guy with a clearly French-Canadian accent kind of pushing his way to the front past this old couple. And Matthew Quigley, of course, steps in and says, hey, we've all been on a long boat ride. They were here first. And when the guy still gets kind of belligerent and saying stuff to him, Quigley gives a nice little, taking his long Sharps rifle and thrusting the butt of the gun into the guy's crotch to get him to shut up. So you establish that this is a guy with kind of a code and doesn't really kind of respond very well to people being mean and things like that. And that comes in very clearly later on when he finally talks to Marston, which before I get to that, there's also, like I said, you have to establish who this guy is. Marston talks about he sent an advertisement around the world, and like 50 people responded, but only he responded one way, and it was the clipping out of the newspaper, and then a grouping of like 6 bullets very close, and he wrote on it 900 yards.
You have a way with words, Mr. Quigley.
Yeah. And then, of course, they have to demonstrate on camera how good of a shot he is, being able to shoot a bucket that's rode out well past the range of most normal rifles, but on top of a hill, and him doing the like picking up the dirt and
testing
checking the wind and all that stuff. Yeah, it's.
I was watching that. When I was watching that, I thought if they redid that scene today, instead of waiting for that guy to drop the bucket, or you remember he says that'll about do or something to that effect. If they did it today, which is what I expected them to do, is he would have shot it out of the guy's hand, because it would have made a better act. Like he not only missed the guy, didn't hurt the guy, but also shot it out of the guy's hand or something because it was on the move. That would have been a cooler scene if I were remaking the movie. Our executive producer back in 1990. Let's try that again. One more shot here, Alan Rickman. Get back in your spot, please.
They were really shooting bullets. Let's try that again. Quick. Tom Selleck, don't kill that guy.
Don't kill that guy, Tom Selleck.
You're not a Baldwin.
That's what I was about to say. I went to the Baldwin School of Movie Directing is what happened there. It's too soon. Sorry.
So anyway, Quigley talks to Marston, and another parallel to the Western is the fact that, Marston considers himself something of a gunman. He's a student of the West, as he says, and he wears, a Colt revolver on his side, and he does fast draw and all that kind of stuff. So he's kind of modeled himself after the American gunfighter of the Old West.
Mm-hmm. Kind of the dime store version.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
Interested but not there yet. Like he thinks he's all that.
Well, it's like people you find now that it's like, well, I live like a Viking. It's like, no, you don't. You read some books. You bring your hair long and you don't bathe. That's not living like a Viking.
In the parlance of today, he is LARPing.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yes, he starts talking about the Aboriginals of Australia, and of course comparing them to the Native Americans of the United States, and how they are essentially pretty much like a blight. He talks to them like they're just an invasive species almost.
You see, in many ways, our two nations are quite similar. We both brought civilization to the Stone Age. Unfortunately, in this country, we have failed in one regard. We have been unable to domesticate the most backward people in the world, the Australian Aborigine. My parents were slaughtered by Aborigines, Mr. Quigley. They attacked so fast, my mother was found dead still holding us sewing. Nowadays, they butcher our sheep and cattle. Her Majesty's government allows the local settlers to deal with the matter their own way. Its official policy is called pacification by force. But the real issue is that, primitive as they are, the Aborigines have learned to keep out of rifle range. Which brings us to you, Mr. Quigley.
Quigley, of course, doesn't take very kindly to that, and I love how Rickman plays everything in a hilarious scene. After Rickman's character reveals like his intentions, the next thing you see is him being thrown out of the window of his house.
Right.
And his men like running to help him, and he stops them. It's like, no one throws me out of my house. And he goes back in, and he's thrown out again. And in a great Rickman style, it's like, don't just stand there.
Get him.
So what eventually happens is that they wind up subduing Quigley. And there's another character that's called Crazy Cora, who is this woman that he meets at the beginning after he gets off the ship. The hands of the ranch were there to not only collect Quigley, but also women to take back to the ranch because they're out in the middle of the nowhere. And they're trying to take her, and of course she's fighting and everything. And he steps in to save her. And so she starts calling him Roy during the entire process. She keeps calling him Roy and trying to dote on him and everything. This kind of upsets him a little bit. After he's subdued, they take him and her both, and they just drop him in the middle of the outback. He's able to... I don't want to give away too much because it's such a joy to watch this film and just watch how everything unfolds, because they do tension just so greatly in this film. But he's able to actually retrieve his rifle and kill the two men. But the horses get away, and so now they have to cross the barren of the Australian outback in order to try and find civilization. And they wind up being saved by Aboriginals, who, of course, use their shamanistic magic and all that stuff and rituals and give them water. And then there's kind of this reciprocal trading of skills and everything. Like, they show him how to find water in the outback. He shows them how to, like, essentially make a lasso and everything out of the leather strappings they have from kangaroos and to lasso stuff and all that kind of thing. So there becomes a bond with them. He saves them a couple of times from Marston's men just coming out and just gunning them down in the middle of the outback. On one part, they're actually driving them off the side of a cliff. They wind up actually able to save one Aboriginal baby that survived the fall. And so they take that with them, and you find out that crazy Cora had a husband and a child. And when the Comanches came drunk one day to her homestead, while the husband was gone, she hid in the root cellar, and afraid that the Comanches were going to come find them and kill them, she put her hand over the baby's mouth to keep it from crying and wound up suffocating the child. And of course, the Comanches were just drunk and rooting around, had no real malicious intent toward them. And when the husband comes home, he just takes her to Galveston, puts her on the first boat, and that's how she wound up in Australia. So you have these really kind of Western through lines, I think, that really kind of make this, to me, it's no secret, anyone who's actually been listening to this podcast, well, I enjoy Westerns.
That was a point I was going to bring up, is that you are that's kind of where you live, I mean, taste wise, out of the, for whatever reason, because a lot of people our age are not Western people, but you're thoroughly read Louis L'Amour and stuff like that. Yeah. like legitimate Western fan, and not a tourist like I am to the Western.
I've said it before, I grew up watching old movies. That was kind of skewed my taste in that direction, to be able to watch old things like, Elia Kazan and all that kind of stuff. And so Westerns are a big part of classic cinema. So yeah, there's that. And I'm a sci-fi fan too. So I'm over the map on that. Quigley Down Under, like I said, he hits all the notes. You get that journey, like I said, through the outback and learning the ways of the Aboriginals and kind of becoming friends of the Aboriginals. They see him as an ally and assist him at certain points in the movie. And he, of course, goes back and gets his revenge on Marston and all that kind of stuff. It's a full emotional journey on every aspect of it. I think it really works because they also cut back to Marston, on the ranch, getting upset every time he finds out that Quigley has survived somehow.
And usually taking out more of his men in the process.
Yes, constantly. There's a really good line. He had offered a reward for Quigley's death. They find out that Quigley, he gives warning that he's coming after Marston, and that he warns everybody on the ranch, you guys can go, but if you're still here at sunup, then you're all fair game. His main ranch hand comes in and says, well, the men are kind of wondering if that reward counts towards us. And he's like, well, who asked that question? He names the guys, have him guard the front porch and make him wear my hat and coat. I love this movie. I think this is, Tom Selleck never really made it as a film star.
Yeah.
He was that big, Magnum P.I. He was a television star. He tried to get into movies. He had with 3 Men and a Little Baby, and this
was the movie Folks that he was in that I really like.
Yeah, he's done some good stuff. He's always been good and everything. He just
Runaway,
yeah,
which I absolutely love.
Yes, yeah, Gene Simmons being slimy Gene Simmons. I mean himself, but
he didn't. Gene Simmons didn't even know he's in a movie.
It's just a documentary of.
What's this camera doing here?
Runaway actually holds up very well.
And Selleck was also, at one point, he was going to be Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Until his Magnum PI contract got in the way.
I mean, he it's kind of like the Mark Hamill curse. Like, right. you make a role so iconic that it
defines you.
Yeah, it's great for us as viewers, but it's bad for you as an actor because it becomes difficult for you to get work.
Because you get typecast and you think you can only because he really does. He has the gravitas to be a like a leading guy. Yeah. Like he obviously pulls. I mean, Quigley, he pulls it off swimmingly in this movie. And
he does really well in westerns too. This isn't his first western. He's done a lot, and he's always really good in them.
I just don't understand why. I guess he was like 15 years too late, maybe. Like because that's really like where he shines is those kind of like John Wayne clone type films.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like he was on the downswing of that kind of movement.
I think it's mostly the weight of Magnum PI. Just to be honest,
just crushed him. Yeah,
it's very difficult to see him as anything else
other than
because he owned that role and it was so popular. The look and the swagger, like you think Magnum PI is Tom Selleck, and that's not the case. But I think in most people's minds,
they're one and the same.
Yeah, like you expect to meet Magnum PI if you meet him and not Tom Selleck.
And I think also like Magnum PI is one of those shows that could have kept going. Like they just they ended it on their own terms.
Yeah.
But if it was left to popularity, it would have gone on probably another 4 or 5 years at least.
Well, yeah, let's face it, it was a freaking awesome show.
Driving around in a Ferrari, getting in a helicopter every now and again with TC.
Hanging out in Hawaii on somebody else's dime.
Yep.
I can tell you from personal experience, that's awesome.
For our audience, he's talking about the time Tom Selleck took him to Hawaii.
While I was there, I didn't enjoy it, but afterwards, I came to terms with it.
I didn't know what I had while I was there.
The mustache was a little ticklish, but you get used to it.
He made me speak at the Republican National Convention. It was really weird.
You showed up, and it was just him in a lounge chair. Speak.
Him and Kelsey Grammer and
Ted Nugent.
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood was just talking to an empty chair for some reason the whole time.
Ted Nugent played me on.
The thing about this movie is I had a friend of mine just a few years ago watched it for the first time. And then he was like, and then I went looking for the first movie. I was like, what? So this was clearly a sequel to something else. This is because of this very... Yeah, he's like, this I was apparently supposed to know who Quigley was beforehand. It's like, no, right. This is it. This is the only movie.
That's awesome that Quigley Down Under assumes that there is a Quigley.
Yes. It's like Rescuers Down Under, right?
Yeah.
There must be a Rescuers if there's a...
So what gets me about this film is that it's if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, it only has a 52% rating. And it's no, this is a much better film than that. I don't know a single person that's watched this film and is just everyone I know just really enjoyed.
You haven't met my 13-year-old daughter.
Adam's daughter.
I talk about a fully formed person, not a teenager.
To be fair, she's, she sat through the whole thing and she did say at the end that wasn't such a terrible movie, which is high praise.
That means she really liked it.
Yeah,
Did she stick around because she thought Tom Selleck was hot? I mean, that's usually why. That's why I stuck around through Folks.
I didn't ask, but
I won't even get into Three Men and a Baby. I was like, oh, but Ted Danson and Steve
that was the summer
and
Josh
Tom
hit
Selleck.
puberty.
Things changed. Things changed.
Josh felt special feelings in that movie.
There was the ghost in the window too. My daughter will watch stuff because like of whoever the lead is, and she'll be like, I want to watch like Saltburn. I'm like, you're not watching Salt. She's like, but Barry Keoghan or whatever's in it. I'm like, I don't care. That's not a movie you can watch. Oh, I'm sorry that the guys you think look good make very
movies that you and I are never going to watch together, and you probably shouldn't watch till you're 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say something else I found out, like reading about this film, is there is a scene in the movie toward the end where he kills two guys with one bullet. Like he shoots through one and hits another.
Yeah.
So apparently that is now known in the sniper circles as a Quigley.
Oh, all right.
So yeah. So a form of homicide has been named after this movie.
They did mention in the movie how he'd been waiting all morning for two guys to line up just so he could do that. Like, they were like,
yeah,
like they pointed it out. But so I was reading about it. I was particularly fascinated about the Aboriginal, because there's a lot of Aboriginal folks in this movie, and I was curious.
Yes.
Like I think we talked about Zulu, and how they, had a huge impact on the local economy, and a lot of folks who would never have been exposed to the industry had these kind of once in a lifetime opportunities. I couldn't find anything right on point about that, but I did see like a lot of the actors who got time on screen got screen credits and then went on to do other things. But one of the things that was fascinating to me is at the time there was sort of I wouldn't say a backlash. There was some legitimate seeming criticism that this was another white savior movie. Quigley had to come in and save the local Aboriginals because they couldn't help themselves. But much like Zulu, there was a heavy contingent of the people who were there during the filmmaking who were Aborigine who said, look, this is a legit story about the kind of things that happen to our people, and it does a very good job of showing the injustices that we experienced, which were largely ignored by the broader world. So on the whole, we support it. It's just just that cultural criticism, that cultural piece of it is.
And I also would say, like the end, like I said, I don't want to give away the end.
Yeah.
But the end really does also kind of balance that out as well.
Yeah.
I would say just
because they were. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
I guess if you don't want to talk about
like,
it. But
it's fantastic when it happened. Yeah, this is actually like the guy who wrote it in like the early 70s. He just I think read like an LA Times article about the history of the Aboriginal genocide, and so he kind of built this Western around it. Like he said at one point, it's like, yeah, I've spent 15 years essentially just being paid by optioning this film and being paid to rewrite it. But it finally found a studio, and of course Tom Selleck attached the lead, and a director who's an Australian director.
Yeah,
and he actually came in with another writer and actually went through and reworked all the stuff to make it actually more authentic to Australia. Whereas before it was an American just kind of writing via the stuff he's read in newspaper articles and books and all that kind of stuff. And they came in and gave it an actual authentic feel to it. It's a great movie. I enjoy it every time I watch it. I don't remember it getting a lot of marketing when it was released. Like, I think I first found it like maybe in a video store on HBO or something like that. And that's the first time I was ever aware that it existed.
Yeah, it was a big HBO rotation for a while.
Yes. And of course, when you what Magnum PI as a cowboy? Yeah, I want to watch that. Again, I love the film. If you're a Western fan, you're going to love it because it's got all those accoutrements. I think that was actually kind of one of the criticisms of it, is that it didn't do anything new for Westerns. But I think that's also kind of what makes it a great film, is that it's almost a love letter to Westerns, but just kind of throwing a different setting and showing how there's kind of a mirror to our kind of classic sense of a Western story to this Australian story.
And sometimes meeting expectations or staying in the lane is not. Yeah. Oftentimes, it's kind of decried now, but it's like those tropes and everything are there for a reason. And so, if you don't have to reinvent the wheel, why would you? I think a lot of times in current cinema, there's just this need to postmodernly deconstruct things.
Yeah.
And it's done like I did with my Atari when I was a kid. I just tore it apart without knowing anything, like why, and I couldn't put it back together. So I think there's a place for that deconstruction, but it's not all the time. It needs to be done by somebody that knows why they're taking it apart.
Yeah, sometimes just doing it by the numbers is good enough.
You took your Atari apart out of frustration for your Tom Selleck summer is what it was, right?
I tried to program my own Magnum PI game, and I didn't know that that's not how it worked. All right, well, that's not a total surprise, but it was a surprising choice. I appreciate you picking that, Jason. So shall we move on to the next surprising choice from the film connoisseur that has studied the greats, who's read all of Kyoto cinema.
You've watched the best. Now listen for the rest. So within the parameters that we've already discussed, as with Jason, if I were to pick a movie on an average Tuesday, it actually is in heavy rotation. This is a movie that I go back to quite often, and I just absolutely love it. Also set in Australia. I guess that's the theme for two of us anyway. It's the 2015 Mad Max Fury Road continuation of the Mad Max franchise.
In this wasteland, I am the one who runs from both the living and the dead. A man reduced to a single instinct. Survive.
It is by my hand you will rise from the ashes of this world.
We are not things. We are not things.
Where is she taking them? I want them back! They're my property!
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day! Want to get through this? Let's go!
As the world fell, each of us in our own way was broken. It was hard to know who was more crazy. Me or everyone else.
It is a movie that we've talked about a little bit in passing in the past, but I wanted to kind of get into it because there's a whole bunch of things that I like about this movie that, as somebody who didn't study film, didn't go to film school, but I have an eye for the things that I appreciate. And one of the really great things for this, especially with my ADHD mind these days, is the pace. It's just relentless. Unlike Quigley Down Under, which is fine. It's a perfect movie. Quigley is. I have no complaints about the pacing of that movie. But I'm never looking at my phone in Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, it is just
it's visual speed.
It is. Yes, it is.
What's interesting about it is that it is so kinetic, but it is also able to transmit an awful lot of information very quickly, very bombastically, but like building a cohesive world in these insanely fast shots. Like the women basically being milked to give the warriors nutrition, like
mother's milk. Yeah, that's stunning.
That's a lot, right? It's shocking
and tells you so much immediately without saying anything. Like it was a very much show don't tell.
Yes,
which I love.
Well, in the water addiction.
Yes, yes, wow. Right.
Well, like George Miller, what he did so great in this, and I think just the Mad Max movies in general, is like we were just talking about with Quigley Down Under. He's like not having to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. He just took the very basics of cinema, but he does it in such a way that it's enthralling. It captures you and puts you in the moment and doesn't allow you to get bored with it. He just moves on to the next thing.
And things there's a lot of like what I would say this is and they may eventually screw this up. I like all things I love, right? So as we're recording this, the new Furiosa movie has come out. I have not yet seen it, which is the prequel to this, theoretically, which
it's okay.
It's okay. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm waiting until I can see it on my TV at home. But the point is what I was going to say is there's all these scenes in Fury Road which harken back to my mind like early Star Wars stuff. The old joke, like the guy's like, oh, I need to create a set piece. All I have is this vacuum cleaner part. And then now there's like an entire series about that part, like it's just there's like 18 hours of war on this, but like
all the posts you see on the internet of like, here's a lightsaber. Here's the Phillips head screw on it.
Right.
That's or the ice cream maker on Bespin.
Yeah.
Like that dude has like books and stuff written about it. It's like he was a dude running with an ice cream maker.
That's right. So specifically this movie, Fury Road, has all like there's a scene where the crow people, they're looking for the green place. They drive through the quagmire, and you have the crow people on the stilts walking through. Nothing is said about them. They don't stop to talk about it. They just see that. Like my brain's like tingling. That's so cool. Like there's no because you didn't talk about it, because you didn't give me exposition on what that is.
That is very much like the giant skeleton on Tatooine,
right,
in the background while the stormtroopers are looking for the droids. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Like,
please don't ruin it for me by telling me more about it. Is what I'm saying to the people, to the Mad Max people. Like, don't fall into that trap. Leave the mysteries of the visuals.
And essentially, the film is a 2-hour chase scene.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not heavy on plot, and that's fine. But it does have a lot of character moments. Even though I think Tom Hardy says like 5 words or something ridiculous. One of the standout scenes to me is when he hands the rifle to Furiosa because she's a better shot.
Yeah.
And then, like, without them talking to each other, he sets himself up as a tripod for her to stabilize the gun. And it's like that unspoken communication, because they were both competent fighters, like, that were just at that moment in sync. There's so much going on in that. And there was not a lot of exposition. There didn't have to be.
Yeah.
Like, you knew these people were killers. They were survivors, and that's why they were there.
So let me do a Jason and quickly run through it, kind of the plot as it is, because there's not much to the plot.
Hang on. Let me get my pillow.
It's a continuation of the Max saga, exists in the same universe, right? And it's
a campfire tale about Mad Max.
And so as a quick aside, one of the things I keep hearing people criticize the new movie, which before it even came out was already this criticism of, it's a Mad Max movie without Max. I don't understand. I'm like, that's okay. It's okay. Like the Johnny Appleseed tale can include other people, right? It's folklore.
This is about Furiosa Appleseed.
Right. So Mad Max, this is presumably years after we've last seen him, I guess.
Or is it?
Right. We don't know. Maybe it's not, right? That's the cool thing. That's another cool. But he gets captured
or maybe
by,
it's not even true at all.
or Morton Joe's the bad guy. Which just as a quick, one of the really cool things is the callbacks they do to the earlier films.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it. And they do it so much better than like Star Wars or the other. Like it's just, like that's the thing. Is like there's fan service there for people who are like diehards. The quick and easy way is the Hugh Keays-Byrne is the guy who played him as Morton Joe, but he also played Toe Cutter in the original Mad Max. Same actor.
Which by the way, is like Toe Cutter. If you got a guy named Toe Cutter in your movie, I'm front row.
All in right up immediately. Say less.
the Muppets Toe Cutter.
And Tom Hardy is just I have grown to really like him as an actor in recent years. The more stuff I see him in. He's
I don't know. Some people knock him, but he is a good actor.
Yeah,
he did a really good job as Max. It's a very physical role, but it's also a very like
not a lot of dialogue. He's got to be able to act without using the words.
Yeah, body language plays a lot into it.
Yeah, just like half his lines are grunts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and growls, and the way he does it does intone a certain message on his emotional state at the time, because also early on in the film, he's also got that thing across his face hiding.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting too is like the war boy that's using his blood to like pump himself up. He's like, all of that's just like the rule of cool. Right. Like that's it's just cool.
So that's the bit. So he gets captured. He gets hooked up because he's a universal donor. High octane, whatever that means, we don't know. He gets a tattoo on his back that says that all of his stuff, all of his vitals about his clean blood and being high octane, but he's also dangerous somehow. We don't really know why they know that, and so they hook him up.
He almost escapes at one point,
right? Yeah, like as they get the tattoo. That's right. That's part of it too, right? As he's getting the tattoo, he tries to make a break for it, and so they hook him up to they call him a blood bag, right? So he's hooked up to an IV to give a sick war boy named Nux a blood transfusion. And then simultaneously, Furiosa, which is Charlize Theron's character, decides today's the day she's going to make a break for it and steal the wife/slaves of Morton Joe, who he's using to carry on his lineage by impregnating them. There's 4 or 5 of them, I can't recall.
With the desire to have children who don't have the deformities that his other children have.
Right. He's trying to propagate the next generation of humans that are untainted by the wasteland and radiation. And
right.
By the way, Charlize Theron is like, she is somebody that does not get enough praise for her range. Yeah. She is, because there's not a moment in this film, and the same, was it where she played the serial killer
monster?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you just don't doubt her at all, and that's a big ask.
Yeah, her and Tom Hardy both they're able to like disappear into roles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's all just like, and you forget that. I mean, she's Charlize Theron.
That's what you. That's what I really like about Tom Hardy is like. I wouldn't say he's Daniel Day-Lewis level, but he blend, like Jason just said. You really forget. Like there'll be instances where the veil kind of drops. And they're like, "Oh, that's Tom Hardy. I forgot about that." There's a glint in his eye. He turns a certain way, and then you remember it. Oh, that's who that is. And by way of comparison, Matt Damon is always Matt Damon. He's never anything.
They're not celebrities. They're actors.
They're actors. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, they take the craft seriously. I think is the way to.
And I think what Tom Hardy does well that Mel Gibson did in the original Max role is, they're not tall guys, either of them, but yet they have that furious nature about them that transcends their like physical, embodiment. Like one of the biggest things, like Gary Marshall said when he hired Henry Winkler to be the Fonz, like he wanted the Fonz to be a tall guy, and Henry Winkler's not a tall guy, and somebody pointed that out to him. It's like you said you wanted somebody who was over 6 foot. He's like 5'10", and Gary Marshall said, "Yeah, but he talks like he's 10 feet tall."
Well, yeah, and there are certain personalities that are Tom Cruise, for example,
Yeah.
is not a tall guy, but he carries himself like he's 10 feet tall.
Actually, I think his co-stars carry him and lift him up in the frame.
I did not say that.
It's the 3-inch lifts in his shoes is what you're thinking of, Josh.
That's Robert De Niro that wears the Frankenstein shoes. In this chaos, there are story arcs.
Yes.
Which is amazing because the war boy, was it Nux?
Yeah.
Like he grows
as a character. Yes.
Yeah. Throughout the film. And it's like you're there for it. Like
you watch the cult lose its power over him.
Yes. He starts as like full on in the Immortan Joe cult. He is a war boy, shiny and chrome and worshiping the VW symbol, which is all just like, I mean, it's just awesome.
This is what I'm saying. So, like, you can see why this is easily in my. It's not a perfect film, but it gets a perfect score from me.
So I feel like it's a good counterbalance to my choice that this is like movie, versus film. Like this is like, I mean, this is just like. This is drinking Jolt Cola and eating like a whole bag of nerds,
which is prerequisite for
heroin.
It is the film version of Speed. Like as we were joking earlier, it's just I can't watch this movie and feel bad. To Jason's point, whatever mood I'm in, I can throw this on in the background. But especially, and this is another thing, I not to beat a dead horse on this, but. The sound mixing of this is one of the first movies I watched in Atmos, in true Atmos and full surround and all this. And the sound mixing is incredible. I think it won an Academy Award for sound, if I'm not mistaken. And they do that thing that we really loved in Dune, where they do the wide shots and the expansive. And like Jason said, using the outback as a scene, as a character in the movie. They're using the expansiveness of the desert, the expansiveness of the canyons. There's just so many things done right from a cinematic perspective that I appreciate on a technical level. Like to your point, like you said earlier about bringing people into a movie, like this is one of my showpiece movies where I'm like, hey, I want to show you my TV and my surround sound and listen, just close your eyes and just listen to this chase scene. And where the guy's playing the guitar and as it zips by you and the camera goes...
The Doof Warrior.
Yeah. As the camera goes under the car, you hear the guitars overhead. Mm-hmm. Like they took that effort. All those things just really impressed me.
And then the guy's like, dude, I'm just dropping off your FedEx package. Can I
That's right.
Can I leave? Please.
I'm never door dashing to this house again every time. I think that's the greatness of what films like this is. Like they're not necessarily high art, but they are craftsman made films. Like every aspect of it is, and that was the great thing about Star Wars too, is the craftsmanship of the special effects, of the sounds, of everything putting together to create an experience.
You felt like the people who did this wanted to be like, they were happy they showed up for work every day. Does that make sense? Like,
there's spectacle involved in, and there's like a Cecil B. DeMille film. There's like it's just or like you said, John Ford. Like I mean, a lot of times he just pointed the camera at a beautiful landscape, but there's that grandeur to it. And he was able to recognize that, just as George Miller is able to recognize like the roar of a V8 and a guy pole vaulting from one
side to the other
to another,
throwing a flaming vault,
right. It's like the chariot race in Spartacus or something. You're just like, holy crap! Is that is that happening? And then it's like and it reads like it's really happening because it was happening. It's not green screened or CGI'd. Some of the background stuff, but there was a guy pole vaulting. You're like, hey.
Actually pole vaulting, actual practical effects.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's like watching a Jackie Chan film. You're like, that's crazy that guy's doing that stuff.
And he's really doing it. It's practical effects. That's
I think we talked about this before in like the world building thing is if you commit to your world building, no matter how crazy it gets, I'll go with it as long as it's solid and is insane the stuff that's happening in this post-apocalyptic world. Not just the guys on stilts, not just the mother's milk and everything's just the bullet farm and all this.
Yeah.
It's like, what are they doing at the bullet farm? Like, I don't know, but apparently that's a big thing. And calling gasoline guzzling and just the tiny little things they do to show. It's like, well, this used to be our world, but it's gone off on this really weird tangent.
Yeah, and I think, obviously Fallout took a lot of inspiration from these films, not necessarily this film, but in the TV show, I think does a good job of that too, of like, and that's the beauty of having the Vault Dweller as kind of the audience insert. But there's this world out there that is built on the ruins of our world, and it is nothing like, you really are going into a different space.
And
like,
the language they use, which is just slightly off.
Mm-hmm.
It's familiar enough for you to understand what they're saying, but also to recognize that it's been bastardized in some way.
So there's one that I remembered, I wanted to keep in mind for this point, which was that when Max is going back, he's going to walk. They're being pursued in one of the scenes, as they have throughout the whole movie. But he's going to buy them time by single-handedly going back and attacking this lone car.
Hey, you need to take the war rig off a click down the track.
What if you're not back by the time the engines are cooled?
Well, you keep moving.
What do you suppose he's gonna do?
Retaliate first.
Which is you immediately know what she's trying to say, right? But that's just a weird way to phrase that or whatever. There's always those little lines.
Well, it's very Seven Samurai, or that.
Yeah.
It's like he goes off and comes back, like, and you don't have to see what happened to know that.
Exactly.
Like,
and he's covered in blood, and they go, it's not his blood, right? It's yes.
Yeah, like I said, there are moments in it that just solidify characters that they've done nothing with, really. Like there's the one scene where one of the women who's pregnant dies, and the doctor's trying to save the child.
Right.
They don't, but he pulls out the fetus, and it's like he was a perfect baby. And there's
a month more. He'd been a perfect baby in every way. Yeah.
Yeah, and Immortan Joe, of course, is angry about losing that. But then, like his freakishly huge son,
Rictus Erectus, which is one of the best.
but like he like picks up and he just like shouts out, "I had a brother."
Yes,
it's this really weird, twisted, like almost sympathetic moment.
Yeah.
Until you remember, it's like, oh no, he had them literally like in a vault inside of a mountain.
Right.
Well, like, and I think the original Mad Max is like, like the trailer is like, in a world gone mad. It's like, and it does not deviate from that from the first movie on.
Right.
Like, no. the world is crazy.
It gets increasingly so.
Which makes sense, right? Like that's
it's a slow it's the last gasp of civilization that's not going to be able, like the kind of implicit understanding is like we're not
getting
back on track.
Right.
We're not, like this is it, and it's just going to get worse. There is no green place,
Which is part of what I love about. So my favorite genre generally is futuristic post-apocalyptic films, or dystopian films, in that sort of same vein. And I don't like the ones I usually don't like the ones that have a happy ending. I like the ones that start sad and get worse, because that's the only future that feels real to me.
Like 1984.
Atlas Shrugged. Oh, I'm sorry. I was channeling Josh there.
Ayn Rand's too.
Yeah, sorry. Well, I think we've exhausted all other options except to talk about your movie.
Okay. So I think we may have talked a little bit about this film, but
earlier this year, actually.
Yeah, I'm good with doing a deep dive on it because this is a film that, again, I cannot watch this film more than once every 3 to 5 years.
It's a heavy movie, dude.
It's a very heavy movie. It's a very long movie.
Next time I would suggest United 93. Maybe we'll watch that.
I think it's probably it's the most beautiful film ever made, in my estimation.
You got to justify that. Like,
okay,
just watch the last 10 minutes of Old Yeller over and over again.
So here's the thing. Let me start with my premise, which is that I don't like mosaic films.
Okay, I take it you didn't like this film then.
I liked it because you like it, and I know that sounds campy or whatever.
That sounds a little creepy.
That's stalkerish, yes.
I watched it because you recommended it, and I watched it with a view for what would Josh like in this movie. Does that make sense? Like I don't know, because you're going to tell me now. We didn't pre-talk about it.
No, we did not.
As I watched, I was like, I wonder what it is about this movie that Josh really likes.
I figured like this is very like you either love this film or hate it. It's a divisive film.
Why don't we remind people what film that is?
That film is the Paul Thomas Anderson film Magnolia.
There are stories of coincidence and chance and intersections and strange things told, and which is which and who only knows. And we generally say, well, if that was in a movie, I wouldn't believe it.
I'm Stanley Spector.
I'm Frank T.J. Mackey.
I'm Jimmy Gator.
I'm Phil Parma.
I'm Dixon.
I'm Prisca Dunny Smith.
I'm Linda Partridge.
I'm Earl Partridge.
I'm Officer Jim Curring.
I'm Claudia Wilson Gator.
These strange things happen all the time.
1999. This is his film after Boogie Nights, which is also a absolutely fantastic film. So Magnolia, if you take the scene from Boogie Nights where Heather Graham and Julianne Moore are doing cocaine and talking about like, I'll be your mom, and like that really intense scene, and stretch that out over like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and then have 15 minutes of Marky Mark singing You Got the Touch, that's Magnolia. It is mostly super intense.
Got everybody who was somebody in 99 in it.
Yeah, so the film is called Magnolia because most of it happens on Magnolia Boulevard in Los Angeles. As kind of like a hindsight, there's an old wives' tale or whatever that magnolia bark cures cancer, and cancer is a very thematic issue in the film. But even like that was kind of thought of afterwards. The biblical verse of the frogs raining down was actually not conceived of until filming started and kind of added to it, because Paul Thomas Anderson was referencing Charles Fort, who, like, if you know, like, ever heard of like Fortean?
Yeah,
comes from him. It's kind of like preternatural investigations, which is also plays into the film. So it mostly takes place over 24 hours. It's about the intertwined lives of a bunch of people that live out in LA. The main thing, it's very difficult to discuss what it's about, because it really is kind of, there's multiple branching storylines.
It's about the human condition.
Basically. To me, it's about the commonality of the effects of child abuse into adulthood.
That's partially. It's also about cancer. It's also about synchronicity. But it's
I will say the Exodus, Exodus 8, whatever verse that is, signs. I read it. I went into it cold. Like, I didn't read any reviews or anything. But I noticed them several times, and I almost think maybe I'm just preconditioned to look for stuff because of like whatever, like subliminal messages in movies. Because I actually think that detracted from that finale. Like, because I was familiar with the verse, I actually knew when I was like, "Isn't that the one about the thing?" and then that happened. I was like, I was already ready for it. Does that make sense? Like,
well, I think I think 8-3 comes up a lot in the film, and that's
there's like the guy in the studio audience holding the sign, and the bus stop, and some other places, And
well, I think somebody playing blackjack because 8-3. I mean, it's a motif for a reason. Why ultimately I like the film is I think that it is such a personal reflection of the tragedy and beauty of life simultaneously that is I do not see many other places. And technically it is mind-blowing from a technical perspective. Like, I have a preoccupation with vanity projects. So after Boogie Nights was so successful, the studio is basically like, we'll write you a blank check. You do whatever you want. They signed off without even looking at a script. And Paul Thomas Anderson, who's also said, like, for better or worse, this is probably the best film I'll ever make. He just jumped at the opportunity and did. He knew that he would never, ever get this opportunity again to do what he wanted to unreservedly. And I think that shows it's such a personal film, like, because there's the whole bit with
Tom Cruise.
No, the cop. That's so stupid. I can't.
John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly, where he's driving around.
Really good in this. Like,
he's driving around as a cop and talking like he's on Cops.
Yes.
He and Paul Thomas Anderson really did that for fun, just like joking around how it would be funny if there was a cop that watched Cops a lot
and just talk to himself in the car.
So he'd just drive around and he'd video it on his videotape on a video camera, of John C. Reilly just riffing. And so they put that into the movie and built his whole character around them just goofing off. Technically, I mean, there's the open, not the opening vignette, but the opening of the movie proper is 135 seconds long, single shot. There's a shot when William H. Macy, you see the reason for his wanting to get braces. And so this is shot on film. This is 1999, before a lot of nonlinear digital editing. The camera had variable speed. So while they're shooting, it changes speed to go to slow motion mid-shot.
That was done in camera?
Yes.
That's really cool.
Not
I noticed those kind of things, but yeah.
So in 1999, that was just absolutely jaw-dropping. There's another scene where they changed the lens mid-shot. When is it Patricia Arquette that plays the junkie girl that goes out with John C. Reilly?
I can't remember who that is, but I'll look it up real quick.
But there's this zoom into her painting, and there's super tiny script that said, "Did it really happen?"
Yeah.
If you watch that scene, there's a second where it blurs because they're changing out the lens to a micro lens. That's probably happened in cinema 5 times.
And now it never happened again because everything's done digitally now.
Right, but it's just the craft. And so you have all these complicated shots, but then you have moments where Tom Cruise, the interview, and then with his father, with Jason Robards, where they set the camera up and they let him breathe and act. And this is absolutely the best performance of Tom Cruise's career. Single-handedly. The scene where his father's dying of cancer. He hates his dad. And so he goes and Philip Seymour Hoffman's kind of the guy, the nurse taking care of him.
Yeah.
And he's just railing at him. Tom Cruise didn't like the dialogue. So Paul Thomas Anderson, he had a situation like this with his dad, but he also knew Tom Cruise it was just do it like you're talking to your dad.
Yeah.
Everything from I Won't Cry for You is improv by Tom Cruise, and Philip Seymour Hoffman starts crying.
Yeah.
And that's all absolutely real because Philip Seymour Hoffman's I didn't know he was going to go there and do that. And it's such a genuine, heartbreaking, real. I think that's the only time that we'll ever see Tom Cruise with the veil removed.
Yeah. Melora Walters was the junkie. Claudia.
Okay.
That was who.
It's lots Julianne Moore has a fantastic scene in a pharmacy where she's a younger woman married to this older rich guy that was a producer in Hollywood. She's picking up the pain medication because he's dying of cancer.
Plus her own scripts for depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's and she basically tells him to F off, and it's such a raw, unflinching...
How dare you judge me? You don't know what I'm going through. Yeah.
Like all the performances are just amazing and real and heartfelt. I think the thing I like about it most is it really is unflinching and uncomfortable, but there's still like a beauty in all of this. It's a very cathartic film to me. There are lots of little things that happen and they kind of coincide, but it's more of like, this is 24 hours. Like, this is life. Like Jason was saying, this is just life.
A snapshot in time of, was it 4 different threads? I guess 4 different lives. And the theme throughout is it starts with the premise of the beginning. The narrator explains to us these 3 coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then the epilogue is the same narrator explaining the odds of chance and coincidence and that does happen.
Right.
When you watch a movie critically, which I really watched this movie like a movie, within a few minutes, I was like, oh, this is going to be that kind of thing. Put the phone down. Let's just watch the film. Right. And because if you said it's your favorite movie, I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to sit and actually, observe it. And so I sort of hyper observed the coincidences that they established throughout the film. Mm-hmm. What I would call echoes, right? So the whiz kid being, Stanley, being a mirror to William H. Macy, the same Donnie versus Stanley, the same sort of intellect and whatever, but also the same child abuse. Like Donnie's all wound up William H. Macy because his parents stole all his money and his winnings from his trivia TV days, and Stanley refuses to perform because he needed to go to the bathroom and ended up wetting his pants on live TV and wouldn't stand up.
Which is what came from a story from Fiona Apple's childhood.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Who she also, I think he was, Paul Thomas Anderson may have been dating her at the time. A lot of the artwork in the film is hers. A lot of it was also inspired by Amy Mann, who did a lot of the music for the film. So I think that's another thing I like about it, that music is intrinsic to the story. I mean, it's kind of invisible, but it's there.
Yeah. So I appreciated it on a technical level, and I appreciated it. Like if I taught a film class, this would be required watching. Does that make sense? But if I was recommending this to a guy that, like my neighbor down the street, probably not. I guess that's the way I would say.
No, it's not for everyone. It really isn't. But it is, to me, it is high art.
Yeah.
Versus Fury Road, which is, and this is not a knock, but it is low art.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It is low case public, and that's not a bad thing.
It's base film done well.
Yeah.
Yes. But to me, like, this is like Magnolia has shades of like Adam McGoyan and more esoteric filmmakers, but it's a little bit more accessible, but also like it's just so raw and so passionate. It's like everything is just like open.
Yeah. It's a filmmaker's film. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I didn't know how you would feel about it, but like when I saw it, I mean, I was in the midst of film school. We went.
So you really were eating the dog food then, like that was part of it.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I don't have a lot of real world comparisons. Like I had a pretty good relationship. I mean, I had issues with my dad, but they were just like everybody's got issues with their dad. But I've been around sickness and I've been around multiple people as they died and stuff. So like there's that.
But you were killing them at the time.
Yeah.
A little different.
A little bit. But there is that shift in people's lives where like everything's going fine. And then the next thing you know, like the ambulance is flipping over because there's frogs in the road.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you can't talk about this movie without talking about what will undoubtedly be the one scene that if you watch this would be the one you remembered, which is the climax to the film and the allusion to Ezekiel 8:3 or whatever it is.
And also like an actual event that occurred. I mean,
right. Not to that extent.
Right.
Not for 8 solid minutes and 3 inches deep of frogs, but it does happen. It is a real thing. One of the reasons I don't like mosaic films in general is because I'm too dumb to follow the timeline. I don't want to have to work for my entertainment.
This is definitely, this is a movie that you can't just sit and watch. You have to
focus,
immerse yourself into.
This is like a trolley problem.
In a weird way, too, it also is almost stream of consciousness.
Yeah, it has that. It's very avant-garde in my mind, like the way it's presented in that. But anyway, the frog scene, like what it did do is it crystallized a moment in time because all the characters were experiencing it simultaneously. So now we know chronologically we've arrived to the same point in time for all the characters, because there was a lot of time skipping in the film, going back and forth, different. And it, unlike other Mosaic films, there wasn't a device that I could detect, which, like, for example, using black and white to show past events versus like Memento or something to that effect, or whatever. There's 100 different ways to show that in a film like this. This didn't do that, so it became. I guess for the plot, it didn't really matter where we were on the timeline for most of the film, because you're really looking at. I would almost say each scene was
almost self-contained. Yes.
It was like a poem. Each scene was like a poem that wasn't necessarily reliant on any other scene, because there wasn't a developmental narrative. What we were really seeing was the vignettes of these stories. Like if you were to watch them all crunched in chronological time, each story was relatively short, maybe 20, 30 minutes per story.
Right. Well, and there's not really much of a character arcs. Right. I don't think people really change, but I think what it does is it allows you to see people as they're seen, and then see them as they are, which is the arc, is like peeling away the preconceptions and getting to who they actually. And I think that's probably best done with Tom Cruise's character.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think the characters are defined, I believe, by their own personal definition of love. Like, I think that is a big part of all these stories, is them wanting love of some fashion, or
in a way they can't have.
Or not thinking that they're deserving of love.
I haven't been on a date since I was married, and that's 3 years ago. And Claudia, whatever you want to tell me, whatever you think might scare me, won't. And I will listen to you. I'll be a good listener to you if that's what you want. And I won't judge you. And I know I can do that sometimes, and I won't. And I can listen. And you shouldn't be scared of scaring me off, or whatever you think that I think, and on. You should just say it, whatever it is, and I'll listen to you.
You don't know how f***ing stupid I am.
It's okay.
You don't know how crazy I am.
It's okay.
I've got troubles, okay?
I'll take everything at face value. I'll be a good listener to you.
I started this, didn't I?
Whatever it is, just say it. You'll see.
You want to kiss me, Jim?
Yes, I do.
That's the big Tom Cruise thing. Like, he's kind of like this pickup artist type guy at the beginning, and it's just about shallow relationships really at that time, and have this persona, but then you find out about his love for his mother who died, and his hatred of his father for leaving them,
which is
in that moment,
and him flipping that story, like to the. So the overarching theme of the whole thing to me was that every character we meet, every personality that we meet is sad. There's not a single person that we meet in this entire journey that is
maybe that's
fulfilled.
why, like, maybe I'm just sad, a sad dad.
But it's very
human.
But in some ways is real, and there's no tidy endings. There's no wrapped up in a bow at the way that it's just everyone is sad, bad things happen, and then they feel worse. That's the movie.
I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I think that, though, like with TJ Mackey, like it's funny that, like, he was, the 900 number, like, video, they shot those and paid for them to air in real life.
Oh, really?
Like the year before they filmed, all across the U.S. So you could be watching TV at 2:00 in the morning. And there's Tom Cruise with these two women saying he's TJ Mackey and stuff. And you're like, what the hell? Like to
get back to Gilbert Godfrey and Up All Night.
Yeah, that's right.
That's just hilarious to me. But I think there's just such a sincerity to it. Not everybody's sad. I mean, like John C. Reilly's character is oblivious.
He's sad. He's lonely. The whole premise of his art is that
he knows he's an incompetent cop.
Yeah,
and that he's lonely.
Because it starts out with him checking he's leaving a voicemail for the phone a date thing. Right, I'm looking for a lady who's not too much stress. I have a really high stress. Like that's the print. Like he starts out sad and lonely. He's on his knees doing a little prayer in his one studio apartment in front of his bed.
And he ends sadder and lonely.
And then he loses his gun. And the whole police department shows up to laugh at him. You know, like
there was a whole thing with Orlando Bloom that got cut as the guy that got his gun.
Oh, really? I thought the kid picked it up. The rapping boy, didn't he pick it up?
No, I think Orlando Bloom ended up with it, but I don't know. There's just something to me about like that was maybe the first time I saw that much honesty on screen.
Because it's definitely like if you're young, I'm also jaded enough that like nothing shocks me anymore. If that makes sense. There's nothing new to me, right?
The Tom Cruise at Jason Robards' deathbed is one of the most honest things I've ever seen put to screen, where he's like, I hate you, please don't leave. Like, if that doesn't break you apart, then you're not human. I mean, that's because that's the dichotomy of being human. You know what I mean? It's like
having conflicting feelings.
Yeah. Yes.
This hurts so good. It's one of my phrases that I like to compare that to.
Yeah, being able to love somebody and hate them at the exact same time.
Yeah, and it's just
a human emotion the three of us feel toward each other every day.
Yeah.
Minus the love part.
But to go from like your introduction of Tom Cruise, all that stripped away, all that's nothing at the end of the day. At the end of the day, he's still that hurt kid, and like to have that vulnerability on screen is, to me, is just absolutely amazing. I mean, think about it, it's freaking Tom Cruise, and this is his third film. Is like
was that early in his career?
Yes.
No.
Everybody, hold on. Here goes Jason.
No, I mean, he started off in the early 80s.
80s, yeah.
Paul Thomas.
Oh, no. I thought you said...
no.
You said Tom Cruise.
No.
You said Tom Cruise.
Right. I said you have Tom Cruise, and then you have this director who is like super early and young in his career.
You missed a few in that sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, this is his third feature film.
Yeah,
right. And he basically pulls the greatest performance of Tom Cruise's lifetime. When Tom Cruise is like not somebody that can be pushed around, and whose real life is very much like TJ Mackey, you know what I mean? Like standing up and walking out when he gets a question he doesn't like.
Yeah.
To be able to pull that vulnerability out of that guy at that time in his life.
Right.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, when his career had definitely shifted away from the acting roles that he did, like Rain Man and Everybody's All-American and all that kind of stuff. And it's more toward, movie star, Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise saw Boogie Nights and was like, I want to be in your next movie. And Paul Thomas Anderson visited him on the set of Eyes Wide Shut to pitch the idea to him. And he was like, I don't know if I want to be that character. That character mirrors the real life Tom Cruise. And can you imagine getting Tom Cruise to do that today? Like, you know what I mean?
Fair.
Like, so
I always think Tom Cruise reminds me of a guy who's his third act in life. I expect it to be like my
Shatner's.
Yeah, yeah. Basically, he was like, I took myself too seriously in my younger days. This is all a bunch of bullshit, and I'm just gonna like. He just turns into some cool dude that we like. He's doing bebop jazz in a club in Chicago or something.
Won't happen.
Yeah, probably not. One can hope.
Yeah, I knew you're a big Paul Thomas Anderson fan.
I immediately zoned in on that too. So.
Oh, he's absolutely.
Do you like Punch Drunk? What is it? What Punch Drunk Love?
Punch Drunk Love is the only film of his I don't like.
Okay,
and I think it's because, and Adam Sandler's great in it. I just think that I just don't like. I don't like him. I don't like.
Yeah, no, I don't like that movie either. I mean, I'm not a whatever. I don't need to beat it or whatever.
I don't get it.
Fair. Okay.
It's a film. Yeah. It just does not. It does not speak to me. But like in a weird way, like Boogie Nights speaks to me. There Will Be Blood speaks to me, and that's a film that is like It's a great film that I'm not going to watch a lot.
Yeah, that's actually a fair point. And now I'm beginning to see a theme because I'm looking at his filmography. So Fiona Apple, he did a bunch of her music videos. I guess that's because they were dating. Is that right?
Inherent Vice was really good. I haven't seen Phantom Thread yet, but I love The Master. I thought The Master was amazing. Also, and that's the thing, like, I feel like his films are so unflinching that it's too much like staring into a mirror.
Oh, I didn't like The Master either. I'm looking at this. I'm remembering.
I love The Master. The Master's amazing.
You sound like you're in a cult now. I love The Master. The Master is amazing.
I would do anything for Mr. Anderson.
Last thing I'll point out, and then we can kind of wrap things up. So the scene where the woman is interviewing Tom Cruise, TJ Mackey, and brings up like how he's been lying about his mom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the I'm quietly judging you. And he's just boring into the camera. It's partially Kuleshov effect. It's partially like you're looking at an actor staring at the film, staring at the camera, and there's the off-screen dialogue is informing you of how you should feel, what he's feeling. It's partially his acting, and it's partially the unflinching eye contact. So I think it was it Marina Abramov or whatever, the artist years ago, and conspiracy theorists are like all about her for whatever, but she did a exposition where she just sat and looked at people.
Oh yeah, that's her. Yeah,
and it like
freaked people out.
Right, but there's also like studies on that, like uninterrupted eye contact.
It's super uncomfortable for most people. Yeah,
right, and I feel like watching a Paul Thomas Anderson film is like
unflinching
uninterrupted.
That's a really good description of, because now that
and again, like I said, it's not an easy watch. It's a film that like sits after I watch it. It sits with me for days or weeks, and I do not want to revisit it. And that's why I love it, because it does have that kind of impact on me. It's like not like watching, I don't know, Kelly's Heroes. Like, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Like, Kelly's Heroes isn't going to be haunting me when I'm trying to go to sleep.
Yeah, my version of this is Ernest Goes to Camp. That's probably the one that I see.
Scared Stupid comes close to Magnolia in intensity. I honestly thought you might like it a little bit more, but I
don't hate I'm brutally honest when it comes to the film stuff, right? So it's hard it's actually a movie that I have on the list to watch again now that I've seen it
in 20 years.
No, I'll probably wait 2 or 3 or 5 years to see it again. Like I said, but I want it. It's a movie that there's movies that I immediately absolutely fall in love with. Mm-hmm. Like music, like food in a lot of ways. Like, this is a movie that I could see myself really growing to appreciate on a second or third viewing, like an acquired taste. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, and sometimes that's I think the beauty of like having a podcast like this and stuff is like talking about films and having that and communal discussion.
Where else are we going to have these kind of conversations in our day to day?
Right. But that can alter our perceptions of, maybe I did misjudge this,
because I wouldn't on script, just on reading the back of the VHS, I would never have watched this movie. but for your recommendation and but for this podcast,
And
so.
the only reason I watched it was because it was Paul Thomas Anderson, and I thought Boogie Nights was
amazing.
And still do think is like, again, one of those things that like you watch it and like, I cannot believe that was a real movie. That was
just happened.
Magnolia to me is a more serious reflection of that kind of feeling of Boogie Nights, because Boogie Nights does have a lot of tongue in cheek. It has a lot of light moments, but then there are those moments that are just stark and like.
Well, the first half of the movie is very lighthearted. Mm-hmm. And then when William H. Macy shoots his wife,
yes,
the entire tone of the film just changes from then on out.
And again, I mean, almost like the kind of like Magnolia, and there's the exterior, and like this industry is great and it's wonderful, but as you peel it back, you start getting things like, we're not giving you a loan because you're black,
right?
And you like porn movies like. The swinging lifestyle really isn't great and leads to jealousy and horrible, and there's drug addictions and like the intro to Roller Girl, where she's like throwing off her top and they're having sex and it's all wonderful, to when you cut to them having to push further and further to keep audiences engaged, and they pick that person, just a random stranger up, and it goes to hell. Like when they make the switch to video cassette, that's heavy stuff, and it's like.
So I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit as our closing thing here. So Jason and I approach this premise from the belief that there cannot, in fact, be one true favorite movie for people who like movies. Okay?
No, that is not.
No,
that is a personal reflection.
It is a situational. It's a situational thing for Jason and I think I'll both agree that it's like mood and day of the week and know whether they're eating or not or whatever. So what I challenge you, Josh, is to say, if it wasn't Magnolia, what would it be? If Magnolia didn't exist as a film, it had never been made, then what would your other quote unquote favorite movie be today? If you had to pick right now with the food in your belly and the powder on your face and
the powder on his face?
That's powder on his nose is what I was.
That's the only way you can take his Cialis now.
That's right. 4 hours or more, brother.
maybe The Thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's in one of my all times.
Yeah, as long as it's depressing and sad. because like a Paul Thomas Anderson character, I'm just sad. That's what I gleaned from that. I was hoping to bring this out and get some more insight, because Jason's like, well, we know why you picked this film, and I was like, oh, maybe this is my character arc. And I was like, you're just sad.
You're just sad.
Sad.
You like sad crap. Things that make you feel sad and make you cry. And
go put on the Smiths and cry. That's right.
We've had enough. We've had enough of your bullcrap, Morrissey.
I will say that, like, I didn't watch this film in preparation for it because I watched it like last year.
That's enough.
And I was like, I'm not ready for this again.
You're full up.
Your decade quota is what you've.
Again, it's one of those movies like, yes, this is a fantastic movie. Do I really want to get it? It's like Apocalypse Now. Do I really want to invest myself at this point in time? Am I emotionally prepared to watch this film?
I will say I went in completely cold, and I don't know what to, because sometimes you guys prank me. so there's a history of like setting Adam up to watch a movie that's going to just suck.
I know you texted me and said, "Is this really?" 3 hours.
I did. I was like, because I was about 30 minutes into it, I was like, before I finish this journey, are you serious?
let me ask you this: did you cry during this film?
I did not.
Okay. Do you ever cry during movies?
Yeah, there's more than a handful of movies that I probably have an emotional.
Well, I think it should also be noted that Adam has super glued his tear ducts shut.
Yeah, I can't.
He had them removed by a surgeon in Brazil.
No, there are. I guess because it did not hit me with the same like catharsis that you have with it. I guess. Like, I didn't emotionally connect with any of the characters.
Because you're not a human.
Probably. Yeah, that's a fair criticism. I wouldn't disagree with that. I've been tested. It's inconclusive as the results.
Yeah.
You know? So you know that I watch The Thing every Halloween. That's like our ritual here. So I saw a thing that I'm going to do this year, which was somebody bought a bunch of Petri dishes on Amazon, and they made Jell-O shots with the labels on them, and I thought that was really cool to do as a party favor for the movie. So if you're up my way, come Halloween, I'll have one with your name on it, Josh. So.
What does that have to do with being sad watching Magnolia?
You don't have to be sad watching Magnolia. You can be sad watching The Thing and Halloween with me. It's funny because
I thought you, but you don't have to be sad watching Magnolia. And in there, it's like you don't have to be, but that's the way it ends up.
the way it
You will be after 3 hours and 8 minutes.
It's no Last Jedi. That's all I'll say.
It is the Last Jedi of wide release art house films.
Somehow Philip Seymour Hoffman returns.
That's dirty, man. So, all right. So it's summer. We all watched our favorite movie, and we ended on a sad note because that's where we are.
Because it's a Josh episode.
That's right.
Because it's true to life. Not
if we were all Star Trek series, I would be Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Jason would be TOS.
TOS, yeah.
And you would be Voyager.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm Voyager, but I think I'm TNG. That's
Jason is Enterprise, but he thinks he's TOS.
But you're definitely
I got no problem with that.
I wouldn't say that as an insult. I didn't say you were Strange New Worlds or
Josh thinks
Discovery.
He's supposed to say Josh thinks he's Deep Space Nine, but actually he's Discovery.
He's the
first season of Picard. That's what he is.
I won't even dispute that.
Undiscovered country. That's what Josh is.
Hey, that's awesome.
You know what the great thing about this bit is going to be? We're actually going to get some response from the Trekkies on this. Actually get emails and.
We have confirmed Trekkies that do listen.
So we have two call to actions for our listeners. One is which Star Trek movie are we, or show, and also to name the 3 books you would take to the future. So there you go. We look forward to reading your
rebuild the Eloy society post Morlock.
I would just take the full transcript of all our episodes to the future. That's all I would take. I don't need 3 books.
Humanity must die.
Okay, you might as well bring the bomb. All right, well, if anybody wants to tell us this crazy stuff, where would they go, Adam?
So if we had an outline, I'd know where to go to look for that stuff.
Oh, my God. Something about Linktree, something about X, something about Facebook.
We're on the
I think it's pretty sad that you can't even remember our email address after like 3.5 years. But
it's either the brick pit or brickpit@gmail.com. Try them both.
It's never the.
Try them both. We'll figure out which one works. Linktree/brickpit. And you can also find us on social media by searching for the Brick Pit Podcast. And as always, we do appreciate all of our listeners out there, and we love whenever you give us feedback, whether it's positive, negative, or somewhere in between. We also we're running out of show ideas. So if you guys have some thoughts about what shows we should be doing next, or some gimmicks that we can do to attract some more listenership, let us know.
If you'd like to be a guest on the show and you're one of the 7 listeners that have not been a guest, reach out to us.
If your parole officer will allow you to associate with us.
With known criminals, family members need not apply.
Family members aren't listening.
That's true.